everyday witches emerge from the shadows of secrecy. Broom closets are flinging open and witches are taking flight. Whether you are hiding in your cozy closet or flying with pride, stay for a spell as Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon and her guests share magical moments, stir the cauldron, and debunk misinformation and misconceptions about paganism, witches, and our wonderful world of magic.
Here we are again for another episode of Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon. Today, my special guest is double special because she has been on the show before. Red Moon Eagle. She's a psychic catalyst. And on November 5th, she discussed our blueprint. But today we're going to talk about something different. Welcome, Red.
Hello, Theodora. I'm so happy to be back. This is exciting. I love to share these lovely topics.
And today, our lovely topic will be soul contracts.
Yes, soul contracts. There's so much.
Explain to us what a soul contract is.
So soul contracts are actually quite complicated and they're quite dynamic. So I like to start with, it can seem straightforward if, say, I have a contract with you. And if we have a contract, it could be that my contract is with you, but your contract may not be with me. It could be that I am here to learn from you, but you are not obligated to necessarily do anything but what's in your path. Whatever your blueprint path is, you just keep doing your thing. But that intersection could be a contract learning experience. And then you have people who have contracts that are doubled up. Each person has a contract with each other. And that makes it a dynamic experience because no matter what happens in that soul contract, no matter where you go in the world, no matter what happens in your life, many times those soul contracts are lifetimes deep. And those people will keep bubbling back up in your life. Every time you think you're done, you're not done. There's another lesson to teach each other. It's quite interesting.
And when you say another life, you mean another lifetime?
Yes and no. It could be in this life that you could have a contract with someone and you could have a feeling that you know them from another life, but not actually be contracted to them in this life. But you have a memory or a feeling that you've had that connection before.
It's that familiar feeling.
Yes, it can be. Yes, it can be. And soul contracts are not as straightforward. A contract doesn't mean it's for one thing necessarily. It could be that you have a contract with someone for several things. It could be relationships. It could be karma. It could be the lessons of how to overcome something or how to use your gifts or how to navigate this amazing world that we live in. Many times people think, oh, well, I must have a soul contract with my parents because I'm like my mother's best friend or I'm my dad's little girl or my dad's favorite son or whatever your perspective is. But in reality, that may not be how the blueprints are written. It could be that you have a soul contract with your mom so that she can teach you how to navigate this world. But she may not have a soul contract with you, even though she carried you in her womb.
That's interesting.
You could have chosen her, but she may not have chosen you. You could have a soul contract with your father and not your mother. And your father could have a soul contract with you, but you could not have a soul contract with him. I mean, it's so dynamic. It's not a one rule rules them all.
Now I'm confused.
Nah, right? It's very confusing. It is. Ask me the questions and I will try to clarify how we do it that way.
What types of soul contracts are there?
as many different kinds as you can imagine, because different people have different needs for their different soul contracts. I'll use a pretty straightforward one that I can't say I see it most often, but it is a common soul contract. You have a mom and a dad, and they have a kiddo. But the kiddo might be an entity that is here to help with awareness. This is maybe what some people call star seeds, right? And they raise this beautiful entity to be a light bringer, to do their higher celestial work on the earth plane to help us all wake up and have connection. Now, those poor parents might be genuinely confused. They have raised this amazing entity and they are working through their karma. They're working through their stuff on this plane. But this beautiful entity has come in and chose them to be their parent. And as a exchange, they are getting these amazing awakening opportunities to work through their karma through this beautiful light entity. But this light entity's contract with them is done as soon as they're ready to fly the nest and go out and do their work. Does that help? I've actually seen that one a couple times where the entity itself has a mini contract, soul contract with the parents, but the parents don't necessarily have much of a contract with them other than to learn as much as they possibly can from that child, from that entity.
What types of things would they learn from their child if it's a starseed?
Absolutely. How to work through karma, how to untangle fear, how to heal from generational trauma, how to take that generational trauma and heal it back through time, how to be present without fear, how to untangle the matrix perception of the way things are, how to forgive, how to love unconditionally, how to accept all the different kinds of sentience around us, from the plants to the animals to the other walking, talking humanoid entities, how to be awake. That's a pretty powerful gift to learn.
Can you give us an example of a family that has a life lesson? Let's say somebody in the family has a soul contract, whether it's the child has the soul contract or one of the parents or both of the parents. Can you give us an example of a family you know?
I can. I actually know a family that the mom has a soul contract with one of her children. And that child has a soul contract with her. And it is generational. She has 3 children, but the one child has that bound soul contract. It's a lifetime contract between the two of them. And that child's incarnation through that mother was very deliberate to help heal that genetic DNA trauma that goes generationally back through that mother's line. And that child is there to help the mom become very aware and work through that karma and work through that fear and help heal generationally the entire family. So I've watched the dynamic in this family actually quite closely over the last 10 years. And that particular child is the one that is the closest to the mom. The mom is the closest to that child. They knew at the moment she gave birth to this child, she was like, oh, I love all my children, but this one is the one that I connect with. There's more to it. I can feel it. And her husband's a little lost because he feels a little bit more connected to one of the other older children. And that's because they have a soul contract with each other, but it's not, he doesn't have a soul contract with this other child. It doesn't mean the dynamic of the family is not healthy. It's just they as souls, as entities, are recognizing that there's something else going on in this relationship. Interestingly, this dynamic between the mom and the daughter came to her, not a starseed. This is an entity that's from Earth. She came to her mother when she was about 12, 13 years old, and she said, Mom, when I have babies, I want to make sure that they're good, healthy, loving babies that aren't going to carry grandma's sadness. They're not going to carry this. My baby's not going to carry your sadness. She knew how to somehow convey that she was there to help heal that generational trauma, to be aware of that DNA correction, that healing that can happen through creating a healthy relationship with her mother. It's amazing to watch that when they have that awareness. And interestingly, when I met them, the mother had come to me and said, I feel like there's something strange going on with my one daughter. And I feel very guilty that I'm not connected to my other two children the same way I'm connected to her. And we talked about it, and she now understands, oh, there's a soul contract. And it's beautiful, and it's absolutely magnificent. Does that help to explain that?
Yes. Are all soul contracts loving relationships?
Oh, no. No. Oh, no. Well, I should say it differently. How it manifests to us may not look very healthy. But on the other side, where we come from, for lack of a better term, it is loving. It is a loving, trusting contract that we are going to teach each other something. And there are vibrational entities that come in that their whole purpose is to teach us about interpersonal relationships. And when they do that, they vibrate at a frequency that sometimes it can be confusing. I'll use a really good example. I have a young man that he came to me. He was 19. His mother had gotten into drugs and alcohol. His father tried to keep the family together, tried to stick with his wife, tried to get her help, tried to do all the things. And this young man, he would make comments like, it seemed like his mother was always making all the wrong decisions. This young man, he said his mother seemed to always make all the wrong decisions, but also at the same time, she seemed like she always wanted to have this very close interpersonal connection. And it seemed like nobody could get to her, almost like she was unreachable. And yet she craved it. And as we talked about it, one of the things that came forward in the reading was that his mother was a dynamic vibrational entity that was working on interpersonal connection. And though it seemed like she was making all the wrong choices, drugs, alcohol, seemingly very self-destructive choices, she was actually teaching her immediate family a great deal about how to have better, healthier relationships through people recognizing the wrong way to do it. And to some people, it would seem like she's the one caught in karma. But you have to look a little deeper, and it's not always as straightforward as judgment and judging the situation, because vibrationally her drive was to experience things, to show, demonstrate, teach, and still constantly try to connect. Once her son understood that, he made a comment. It was this amazing comment. He said, so my anger and resentment, I have to let go of so that I can accept what she's trying to teach me. And I still don't have to put up with that bad behavior. And I went, yes, that right there. You don't have to put up with the bad behavior, but you can still learn and accept and grow from the experience. And he left. He was a little confused. He called me back about 3 weeks later, and he said, I said it out loud, Red. I told my mother, I know that you're trying to teach me, but I'm not going to accept the bad behavior, but I'm going to accept that this is your lesson and you don't have to do it that way. She went into rehab that very next day, and she has been clean now for 7 years, because that vibrational drive that she came in as an entity is part of the contract with her husband and her son about teaching about interpersonal connection and how to do it in a healthy way. And her husband didn't have very good healthy mechanisms. So her apparent choice to do drugs, or her apparent choice to have chemical dependency issues, might appear from a very judgy place, that she's running away from something, that she's not dealing with her stuff, that, all of these things that people say. But once she was seen, truly seen for the entity and the vibrational frequency that she was trying to manifest in her life, and her son saw it, she was able to be at peace with that, knowing she could have that connection. She went into rehab, and that family has just blossomed. They're all so much happier. The husband went into counseling with her. They have a much healthier relationship. I've actually gotten to know all three of them quite well. That's an example of what might seem like a soul contract that's not healthy. It might not seem like it's all happy, and it's challenging. I mean, he came to me and it was a really bad place. They were all in a really bad place. So it's not a straight line necessarily. Every single time you have a connection with somebody doesn't mean there's a soul contract. It might mean that you have a contract with them or they have a contract with you, but it might not be mutual. And it's not necessarily easy to divine out what that is, what's actually going on.
Have you been wanting to ride your broom like you stole it, rather than hiding in the shadows? Theodora Pendragon is here to help your magic shine, whether you want to show the world your subtle sparkle, or you really want to light your fire. Visit Theodora's online store at witchcasting.shop. That's witchcasting.shop. Remember, there's never been a better time to be a witch.
Let's talk about soulmates. Ever since I was a little kid, I heard the term soulmates. Does that have anything to do with soul contracts?
It does. And I've kind of on several occasions wished that the soulmate conversation wasn't so Hollywoodized. Because I remember the first time I heard the term, and my guide outright said, absolutely not. And I went, absolutely not what? Like, I didn't even understand why my guides were so absolutely not. Stop. And it took me a while to understand it, because the first time I heard soulmate, I think I was like 13, 14 years old. And it was, the hot topic in junior high. And I think that's about right. If you think about brain development and hormones and all the things that happen when you're a teenager, like, of course, that's the hot topic. Of course. But I knew it wasn't right, but I didn't know why it was wrong. And I don't mean wrong as in absolutely wrong, but it took a couple years. And what actually helped me understand it a little bit better was when I was a teenager, I volunteered with a group of ladies that we all went to different churches, and we had come together as kind of this spiritualist group that all kind of believed a little bit in astrology and crystals and hands-on healing. And again, this is in the South, so everybody's hardcore their religion, but still this other thing was happening. They all had gifts. And we volunteered at local nursing homes, and we would go into the nursing homes and we would do things like play cards and read the Bible or read a book to them, and bring our crystals in and do uplifting, connecty things. If you've ever been to a nursing home, they can be very depressing places, and people are stuck in rooms and they don't have a lot of interaction with each other. Sometimes they're bedridden. There's a lot of sadness. Well, I met this couple, and they were in bed side by side, and they had been married forever. They had met when they were 12. They were married when they were 16. They had 3 or 4 kids. I can never quite remember how many. And when I met them, I knew when people talk about soulmates, this is what they envision. These two people. They finished each other's sentences. They loved each other at first sight. When they met each other, they knew this was the thing. Everything in their life they did together. I mean, he couldn't even imagine. I mean, he was in World War II. When he went over to Europe, she immediately volunteered so that she would get sent over to Europe too on the Red Cross. Like, they found each other. You think about the Hollywood, like she feels this thing in her heart and then she runs across this field and lo and behold finds this guy on the battlefield, that kind of like Hollywoody thing. That's almost kind of what happened in their story, only it was not quite so dramatic. And to the outside perspective, when you first met them, you knew that this is kind of this beautiful soulmate connection thing. Now, the underlying factor to this is, though, that they were also part of the same soul group. So they knew each other from a soul level, from an entity level, and they had a contract with each other in this life. But everything else in their life went to hell in a handbasket 4 times over. He made his fortune, lost his fortune, made his fortune, lost his fortune. They were in a nursing home that was not the nicest nursing home in town because their son, one of their children, had literally stolen their entire savings 3 or 4 years before they ended up so sick they ended up in a nursing home, and he committed suicide. Like, all of their children had passed before they did. They had tragedy after tragedy after tragedy after tragedy. And if you looked at their life, you would wonder, how did you even survive? Why did you even stick it out? Well, because they had each other. They had a soul contract with each other. And that may seem like a beautiful thing. And yes, it is. It's a beautiful thing. But I also look at the rest of their life and the story they told me over a period of several months before they passed. And I recognize there was a lot that happened to them that anybody else that didn't have that contract with someone to support them, I'm not sure anybody else would have survived. So I think it was a valuable lesson for me to learn that soul contracts, soulmates, what people like to call soulmates, might sound like a beautiful thing, but there's an energetic price to pay, so to speak, with what your lessons are. If your lessons are not about connecting with other people and learning to have healthy relationships, what are the lessons in your life? These 2 people that I talked to, they never fought. They never had anything to struggle in their personal relationship because everything just moved smooth like butter. But everything else in their life fell apart several times over. So I always caution people, like, you think you want a soulmate? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And maybe that is something in your blueprint and maybe it's not. But I encourage people to look outside the idea of soulmate and look at the opportunities of connection you can have with all of these entities that can teach you so many amazing things. And we are in a dynamic time where we are encouraged to grow as spiritual entities. And the person you meet when you're 16 and you marry and have 2 kids with might not be the person that you grow into when you're in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. You might change that dynamic several times as you grow, and it should not be this guilt-ridden, awful thing that, oh my gosh, well, maybe that person is, I'm breaking a contract. Contracts aren't like that. When you have a soul contract with someone, it just is. You don't break them. It's not like a vase that you knock off the table and it's shattered into a million pieces and you can't put it back together. That's not how this works. It's much more accepting and fluid than you think.
And we can have several soul contracts within our lifetime.
Oh, yeah. Oh, easy peasy. You can actually have, I don't know what to call them, but it's almost as though you have a pivot point in your blueprint. So say you're living your life and you're married and you got kids and you're living your dream job or whatever, and something shifts in you or something shifts in someone else, and a cascade of events start to happen. And that cascade of events create a pivot point where you think right here and you're going to go forward, but in reality, that pivot point shoots you off to the right angle to your right or to your left. And that angle and that shift opens up a whole new dynamic of opportunities and a whole new set of contracts that you have an opportunity to engage and create learning opportunities for you and the people around you to make connections in a whole new way. It doesn't mean that the life you had before was wrong. 9 times out of 10, it wasn't wrong at all. It was exactly what it needed to be. It just means that now is the pivot point and you wrote the opportunity of choice in your blueprint. Most people take those opportunities. Every once in a while, I meet somebody who doesn't take the opportunity, and they will spend a great deal of time fighting the universe, fighting all of the opportunities that come at them because they really want to hold on to this old thing. And sometimes that's what they do. Sometimes they don't move forward, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that because there's multitudes of opportunities for other people to engage those people as well. It just means that they're not ready, they're afraid, and they can't quite come into the place of movement with that pivot point. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with it.
So what you're saying is when this opportunity comes along, it's like an urge. Okay. So let's just say somebody is in a marriage for several years. And then all of a sudden this opportunity comes and the person can decide to stray or to fight that urge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the urge could be a combination of there's a urge that is physiological, right? The physical body has an attraction or an urge. You have a mental attraction urge. You have a spiritual attraction urge. They come in layers. We are a multi-layered, multi-dimensional entity. So say this opportunity, you're married, you meet this person and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm attracted. What is the lesson, right? Instead of just saying, oh my gosh, maybe I'm just not supposed to be with my husband and check it all behind, it could be that it is an opportunity to connect with somebody in a spiritual layer, maybe not in a physical layer. Or maybe it is a physical layer. Maybe it's a physical and spiritual layer. Maybe it is all of the things and it is an awakening point where, well, the husband that I have is maybe not right for me anymore. Maybe we've outgrown each other. Maybe it is that pivot point where you're not with that person for a while. What I caution people always is I want you to listen to your intuition. Listen to what's the niggling, what's the urge, what is pulling you, and evaluate it. Look at it and then get outside perspective. Get somebody to reflect it back to you and find out who this person is, because I have met people that they go from relationship to relationship following those urges, and it's almost a cookie cutter of the very first person they were with. They are literally having the same lesson over and over and over again with all of these different people, but they get attracted to the newness and they never actually do the shadow work that's behind the urge. The reason the urges are coming forward is the universe is saying, now we want you to delve deeper. We want you to really go to the bottom of the well and find out what the lesson is in that relationship. And you don't always have to leave the person you're with to get there, but the universe is giving you the opportunity to reflect. I have a kind of a universal thing that I tell most people is there's a saying out there that says that you should follow your bliss or something like that. It's like, follow your bliss, follow only the happiness. And I caution people with, yes, I want you to find your place of peace. I want you to find your bliss, but you also have to walk through the gauntlet. You have to walk through the shadow to know yourself well enough to know what bliss really is. What is true happiness in a connection, in a soul connection with someone else? Every soul connection you have will show you a shadow piece of yourself. And if you spend your whole time running away from the shadow, you will never learn what the shadow of someone else's contract with you is trying to teach you. We teach each other so much in so many ways, and it's always valuable. I'm a teacher. Every student I've ever had, I can look back and go, every single student has taught me something. And it's not always right away. Sometimes it's later and I go, oh yeah, I missed that.
You mentioned the urge, like when we have the urge to do something. Is that our intuition telling us to do it?
It can be. It depends on how your intuition works. Some people's intuition is very body based. Some people's intuition is voices. Some people it's the thought that comes from nowhere. Like, where did that thought come from? I would never have thought that. Some people it is almost a physiological, like all the hairs on your arms stand on end, or it feels like your hair is trying to stand on end. Some people, I had one lady who would get a her throat would start to feel like she needed to clear it every time her intuition kicked in. And she didn't even realize she was doing it. It was fascinating. Some people it's ringing in the ears. Some people it's the deja vu that is not the dreaming deja vu. I call them signposts. The deja vu where I've been there, I've done that, and you know what's going to happen next, but I didn't dream it. I just know it's going to happen. Those are signposts in the blueprint that say, warning sign, you are right where you need to be. Pay attention to this. There's so many different facets of intuition. Intuition is a is a magnificent plethora of opportunity because our human bodies are so complex and we are multidimensional. So however which way you can perceive the world is how many different ways of intuition there are.
When I follow my intuition, it's either be careful because this could be dangerous, or, oh, this feels so right.
That has a lot to do with physiologically how it feels, because you've said it now. You've like, it feels right or it doesn't feel safe. Not everybody has that. Not everybody's intuition speaks that language. I'll use myself, for example. Feeling has nothing to do with it. My own personal emotions about things give me awful clarity about anything. I'm never going to be right if I trust my emotions on anything. I pay attention to the vibrational frequency of movement versus stillness. I can either follow a flow or the flow stops. It's as though energetically somebody either has the faucet on or the faucet is off. But if I followed whether it felt good or felt wrong, I would probably do it incorrectly 99% of the time because my gifts are not empathy. I have absolutely no empathy in the gift category. I'm a very compassionate, giving, caring person, and I care so deeply about everything that if I tried to rely on just my emotions, I would not have clarity on anything with my intuition. But I don't over intellectualize it either. So it's not an intellectual feeling or guide. It is energetic. It is about whether the energy flows or it doesn't flow. Does that help?
It does. So our intuition is very individual.
It can be. It's very much, I believe, based on a combination of physiological energy centers where you pull your energy from naturally and what gifts you chose to have access to in your blueprint. So, for example, I'm not empathic. I'm extraordinarily energy sensitive. I have very strong earth sense. So everything goes that direction. So my intuition comes at me from that avenue only. When I was younger, I got told, well, you're an empath. And I really struggled with that. I was like, yeah, but I don't pick up on all those emotions that everybody else is picking up on. But I'm surrounded by empaths. Like everybody, it seems like they find me. I could be in a cave in the middle of the desert and every empath in the county would find me, guaranteed. Because there's not a feedback loop with me. But I recognize that empaths use their feelings to navigate how their intuition works. Their feelings, their connection to others, whether it feels good or feels bad, it gets reciprocated or not reciprocated in a situation. And they learn how to navigate that from the time they're very small. And wherever it sits in their body also tells me where they're feeling it from. So if the feeling is up here, then that's kind of where the energy is in the upper head. If the feeling's in the chest, that tells me a lot. If the feeling's in the hips or the legs or the knees, that tells me a lot too. It is very individual based on your blueprint and based on the gifts you chose to have. So if you have empathy, you could have empathy and energy sensitivity. So you could have a double whammy. You could be somebody like myself who's only energy sensitive. And if an empath is trying to emote a safe feeling and share that intuition with somebody who doesn't have empathy, and it's just emotion based, that person's going to be a little confused because they're not picking up on the subtext of the empath sharing that. And energy sensitive equally is confused if I'm trying to energetically share with you, but I don't use any emotional language. You're not gonna feel like there's much of a connection because you need the emotional connection. You need the feeling of the connection with the other person. It matters. And that's how that intuition and how those gifts kind of play in and with each other.
Can you tell us about soul groups?
I'm happy to. Soul groups are, as best that it's been described to me, is how we come into being as an entity. So wherever we come from somewhere, and we come in as a grouping. Now, from what I understand, is those soul groups then somehow ascend to wherever they're going next together. Where we come from and where we're going, I don't pretend to understand that. I've never gotten clarity on that. But when you live a life here on Earth, specifically, it's very rare that you don't have some connection to someone in your soul group, somewhere in your core foundation. So either that is an entity in your guide group that is part of your soul group, or like that older couple that I described, like they were each other's anchor belonging to the same soul group for this life. So they were never alone. They knew they were never alone. Earth is a really hard place to incarnate. It's heavy here. It's quite dynamic. The energy is volatile. It's a fire planet. Things are going off left and right. I mean, how many times in history can we say there's not a war anywhere on Earth? None that I can think of. There's always something being volatilely explosive, right? So the energy is quite heavy. It's quite volatile. So you need some connection to your soul group to anchor you so that you know that you're not alone and you're doing the work. I've met whole families where, say, the mom and the daughter are in the same soul group, and then the great grandma was part of the soul group, and dad's uncle was part of their soul group, and that dad was part of his son's soul group, and his wife's sister's cousin was part of the soul group. Like the whole family's like 2 or 3 soul groups all enmeshed together. I have seen that happen. I have also seen families where no one in the family an entity is born into is part of that soul group. Soul groups seem to average somewhere between 11 to 3,000 members. They can be huge. And usually the larger groups seem to be those light entities that seem to come from, for lack of a better term, stars. So they are extraordinarily, there's large clusters of them. And so when they come in, they kind of like cluster together. So you'll see mom and brother and sister and uncle, and they're all the same. And then they stay in the same hometown, and like 15 other people are kind of all together. And then they move to New York City and they find the 10 people that are part of their soul group. Like, it's very interesting how different soul groups are kind of drawn to each other. There's an energetic drawing that happens with the interconnection between contracts and blueprints and kind of what they're here to do. Entities that are from Earth seem to average more in soul groups between, say, 11 and 70-ish members in a soul group. Ish seems to be. After that, if you're an entity from here, it just doesn't seem to, you don't really have that many more. It seems to be entities that come from other places that bring those large groups with them. I don't know why. I've never understood it. Nobody's ever explained it to me, but it seems to be what's been happening. And in your blueprint, they show up very clearly as these bright, it's like somebody has stuck a glow stick in the web of your blueprint, and it's this bright, shiny spot. So sometimes when I meet people, if their guides, if none of their guides are part of their soul group, their guides will show me. They'll go, okay, dangle this out in front of them and tell them this person they're going to meet is going to look like this, behave like this, act like this, and in this amount of time-ish, they will meet this person. Doesn't mean that person's going to marry that soul group person. People get that all confused all the time. But that soul group connection is important so that they can do their work, so they can anchor in and be here and be safe. I'll use a young lady I met many years ago. She had a best friend that she met in elementary school, and they had met, and then she moved out of town, and she'd never met this young lady ever again. But for her whole life, she would talk about her. She goes, I remember this girl named Christy, and she would describe her. She would talk about how they played together. She had this feeling every once in a while that Christy would think of her, and then she would think of her, and she just knew that they had this connection because she was a member of her soul group. She recognized it. And then during the reading, I let her know her guide was like, yeah, somebody else is going to come into your life soon that's going to be part of your soul group. And the day it happened, she texted me like 14 pages worth of text of what happened and how she met this person. And they randomly met at a bar, and another woman that she just had an instant knowing that, And this woman, I guess, was 4 or 5 years older than her. So they had nothing in common, like no career that was the same, no hobbies that were the same, completely different cultural backgrounds. Like there was no reason for that connection to be as strong as it was. And from moment one, it was strong, and they are still just fast friends, never will part ever. They talk about being old lazy in nursing home together. I think it's funny because they have this whole thing they figured out. So soul connection.
And they both feel the same about each other, that immediate connection.
Immediate. Soul group connections are often like that. And I think that's where soul mates gets confusing. Like if a woman meets another woman and she's like, but I have this amazing attraction, but I'm not gay and I'm not bi. And well, and then this whole cultural thing gets in the way and people are like, well, I must be bi because I have this amazing connection to this person. And it doesn't mean they are or not. It just means that they have this soul connection with this other person, this other entity living a human life. And it can be very confusing if there's gender or age confusion. It can be very confusing if there's a 50-year age gap. It can be extraordinarily mind-bogglingly awful to untangle if you've got a 16-year-old girl and a 40-year-old man, or you have a 2-year-old boy and a 16-year-old girl. Like, it can be so confusing for people to understand that soul group recognition has absolutely nothing to do, 99% of the time, has nothing to do with the meat suit.
The meat suit.
It has nothing to do with your earth suit. It has to do with your connection to the entity that is manifesting through that earth suit. And that connection can be so validating if you can let go of the trappings of what society says attraction should be. Soul group connections are totally different, and it's beyond soul contract, because soul group doesn't necessarily mean you have soul contract. So you can meet somebody from your soul group and recognize that they are part of your soul group and there be no soul contract.
So it sounds like people in the soul group, you could have a beautiful relationship with them, but it's not a soul contract.
Correct. It might not be anything at all about teaching you or them about anything. It could just be a connection to say, hey, you're not alone on this earth plane. Hey, I got your back. I'm with you. I got it. It's hard. I'm here with you. I got your back. You're good.
That sounds lovely.
It is. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful, especially when it's healthy and it hasn't been confused with all the trappings of societal's idea of what that could, should, might look like.
This has been very informative. I've learned so much, and I thought I knew a little bit about soul contracts and soul groups and connections and soul mates. Thank you for clarifying all this.
You're very welcome. It is probably the one topic I untangle the most because there is so much societal pressure that if you meet somebody, they're the one. You're looking for the one in a relationship. You're looking for the Hollywoodized version of bliss. And people negate and don't cherish those amazing relationships we have at all the different levels. And they are all beautiful, no matter how hard they are. They are beautiful and they are valid.
Well, thank you again for a wonderful episode.
Thank you.
It's been lovely having you back on the show again. Thank you.
Thank you, Theodora. This is amazing. I love this.
I love this too.
Thank you for joining us for Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon. Have a burning question or have a topic you'd love Theodora and her guests to discuss on the show? Contact her through Instagram at Theodora Pendragon. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And help us spread the word by leaving us a rating and review and sharing it with your friends. See you next time, and may your magic always shine.